Hi everyone, welcome to our very first edition of Gardening at Home with Mr. Price. So pretty soon here you're going to be getting your home garden kits delivered by me. They are going to include a lot of pots, soil, plant starts, and vegetable seeds, so you can grow your own food at home since we can't do it on the farm this year. So even though I'm bringing you a bunch of pots, I wanted to get us started with our gardening series on repurposing pots and things you can use to grow your own food. So the learning objective of this first lesson is simply to understand what sort of containers you can grow food in and what sort of patterns they have, what they have in common. So let's go ahead and get going. So whether you have just a windowsill, say in your kitchen, or you have a patio, or you have some sort of porch in your apartment, or a larger garden space, or even a farm, like we can all grow food. And even if you don't have a large garden space there, we can get really creative and figure out how to grow some food in a smaller space like a porch as well. So if you're gardening on a porch, we typically call this container gardening because you're going to be using some sort of container or pot. So the cool thing is there's a lot of different things we can recycle and reuse to make our own pots. So usually when we think about container gardening or pots, we're thinking of something like this, just like a typical black plastic pot with some holes in it for drainage. So when we think about it, all we have here is just a contained space with holes. So before you go buying a bunch of pots or materials, you might see what you have around the house first. And before we do that, we want to consider how much space do you actually have to grow. So if you've just got a smaller porch on an apartment, you might not want a bunch of really huge pots like this. But the cool thing about these big pots are you can treat them as a little mini garden bed. You could say fit 6 heads of lettuce in here, or a bunch of different herbs, or like a tomato plant and 4 different heads of lettuce. So we often want to think about these containers as only holding one plant, but that's really not the case. You can think of them as little mini garden beds, just like we have on the farm. So the one pattern we want to identify in these pots, again, is that they simply are a container and they have holes in them. So we can get really creative, and I'm going to show you some different materials you can use to make different pots for different sizes. So starting with, say, a windowsill garden, if you've just got a little bit of space in your house or apartment, you might use something like a yogurt container. We probably have something yogurt size. You could use the small little single cup yogurts also for a single plant. But these are really, really great. They're often really easy to find and very easy to poke holes in, which I'll show you in a minute. So yogurt containers can be great for a windowsill, or you could get a bunch of them and have like a larger space on a porch or patio as well. Plastic milk jugs, or these milk cartons, you can see in my old almond milk here, these also make great containers. Just because it's square doesn't mean it doesn't hold soil, right? So this is still perfectly fine for growing some food. We just cut the top off. You might even be able to get 2 pots out of this and poke some holes in the bottom. For stranger sized containers, we could use, say, this apple cider jug and cut that off, or say like a plastic water jug like this. So all these things are slightly different sizes, so they'd be suited for slightly different sizes of plants as well. So if you have a little more space to work with, you might consider something like a 5-gallon bucket, which you can often find. You don't even need to buy them. This one actually already has holes drilled in it, so this would be perfect for a larger plant like a tomato, a zucchini, a pepper, an eggplant, a cucumber, something that's going to take up a little bit more space. You might also have some like Rubbermaid containers or some old containers like this lying around. These make really excellent little mini garden beds. You could fit a lot of food in here. You could fit maybe 8 heads of lettuce, a bunch of different spinach, some mustard mix, 2 kale plants. So you could actually grow a lot of food in a container like this. So I encourage you not only to maybe look around where you live and see where you find some materials to recycle, but you might even be able to like walk around your neighborhood or walk through an alley and find a lot of stuff. I found a lot of great gardening materials just sort of walking around my neighborhood over the years. So these are just some examples of what you might use, but you can get even more creative. I've seen people make little mini garden beds out of old dressers, like dresser drawers, out of bed frames. So the sky's really the limit. The one commonality we have here is that it is a container of some kind that will hold soil in it. That's really it. Okay, so we're going to look at converting these repurposed recycled containers into planting pots. So the tools you're going to need for this project are a pair of scissors, a screwdriver and hammer if you have one. If you don't have one of these, you could probably use your scissors. You could use a sharp pokey stick. Ideally, to drill some drainage holes, you have some sort of drill, but if you don't have a drill, you can totally make this work without them. So I'm going to be converting 3 containers today. We got a basic little yogurt container, this old milk container, and this large water container. So we're going to go ahead and start with the almond milk container here. So just because it's square doesn't mean it won't work. So what we're going to do is I'm going to carefully just stab this with my scissors, and I'm going to save as much of the container as I can. And I am just going to cut around the top here. So the top is off. I didn't do it perfectly straight, but that's okay. Oh, there's a little spider in there. How fun. This is going to be big enough that I could actually grow like a decent sized parsley or a large herb of some kind, maybe some thyme that would like to spread. So this can be a really, really useful container. So what we want to be doing now is adding drainage holes, because if we filled this with water and the water has nowhere to go, then our plant roots and the soil are going to get too wet and everything's going to drown. So what you think we want to do is add a bunch of holes on the bottom. But what this might lead to is too much water exiting the plant. So for really good drainage holes, what we actually want to do is add some around the side. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start by just using my drill, since I have it, and I'm going to add 2 drainage holes per side. So there we go, I've got my drainage holes on the side. I am going to do 1 on the bottom so we don't get any pooling. But the reason we have the holes on the side and not a bunch on the bottom is that's going to allow the water to drain a little bit more slowly, but still have a place to go if we add a little bit too much when we're watering. So there we go. This plant pot is now ready to grow some food. So if you don't have a drill, you can usually make most containers with a pair of scissors. You just have to be really careful when you're doing this, that your hands don't slip and you cut yourself. So make sure you are not just alone when you're doing this and there's someone around, and please just use caution. So I'm going to try to make some holes in this yogurt container here, and I will start with just 1 on the bottom. So I'll take my scissors out, and I'm just going to carefully and gently wiggle them back and forth. You can see my hole starting to form. Now I've got it, and then I'm just going to kind of scrape around the plastic, and I've got like a nice even hole there. So now that I've got my 1 bottom drainage hole, I'm going to try to make some around the side as well. So you can see these holes are not all that tidy, but they're going to drain water just fine. So this container is now ready to rock. Okay. So I now have 3 finished containers. I've got my reused water bottle. So you notice the pattern we're identifying here. We got 1 hole in the bottom, and then we got, I've got about 8-ish holes on the side per container. So this is going to allow some water to go straight through the bottom quickly, but most of it is going to be able to drain through the sides. So hopefully this has been helpful. My challenge for you this week is to see if you can find 1 container to recycle and reuse to expand your garden space. This is a really great way to keep things out of the landfill, keep things and reuse before you even recycle. So because these are made out of plastic, you could actually use these for multiple years. So you could actually start a patio or container garden for almost no money at all if you're just able to find some of these materials. So make sure you're also answering those discussion questions as part of this video so we can all check our learning. And next week we'll be talking about the details of soil and the soil food web as we prepare to plant our plants.